Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Documentary Club, a place for documentary lovers. I'm Jeff Jones, and with me, as always, is Jack. Like and subscribe if you enjoy our discussions. You can join the channel to help support us and get perks such as advanced notifications on which documentaries we'll be covering next and new clips before they go public. Today, we are talking about Power, a documentary released on January 18th, 2024 on Netflix. But before we get to that, I'd like to welcome Jack into the show. How are you doing today, Jack? Welcome.
I'm doing very well. Greetings to everyone that's joined us to talk about this really interesting documentary about policing and some of the history of how policing began in the United States. Really interesting, a lot of interesting factoids that get popped up and shown throughout the documentary and all the history.
There's really not a lot of documentaries like it. I think in some of the reviews that I read about it, it talked about the focus was police brutality. And although police brutality is part of it, I don't think that that's quite the focus of it. I think it's
No,
more about, like you said, what is the history of policing? Where did it start? What was its goal? And who polices the police?
sure, it answers some questions, but others it leaves open. But it also shows the changes in police when certain laws get changed. Like when slavery ended. There's just a lot to it. There's a lot there that a lot of people do not understand, and I think it's important. This one guy that talks throughout in and out the documentary, he asks a question: if we were to invent policing today, would it? We didn't have anything. Would it look like what we have right now?
It's one of the
And my
greatest questions of this
yeah,
documentary.
yeah,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think the answer is no, it wouldn't look like that. It would be different. I think a lot of the original police force was about protecting property and not people.
it was, and but that cycle continued as we moved into the 19th and 20th centuries. I think another question that the documentarians were asking, who really has the power? Is it the people or is it just the police department? What power a sworn police officer in the United States has? What can they do? Well, they have a badge and a gun and the authority to take you to jail. Period. But you have to again come back to the actual question: who really has the power in the United States? Are we really free? And it does raise some interesting thoughts about how policing exists right now. And hey, look, I think I'm with you and probably the bulk of people that are listening. We must have the police. There must be some type of some type of organization that if we're going to live in a structured society, we must have something in place because there's always going to be those that are going to try to take what's yours or hurt someone or whatever. We need those people. Do we need it in the guise that it is today? Well, personally, I think drastic changes must be made.
This film requires curiosity or at least suspicion.
Police power is immediate power. Do what I told you to do right now, or else I decide what happens next.
That's really where we're at.
Yeah.
No one ever took a look back to say, why are we doing it this way? Why is it this way? We keep doing the things that we keep doing because that's the way we've been doing it. And that's not good enough for me.
I guess we should also say, anyone that watches this documentary, it's divided up into sections. And one of them is called status quo, one of the sections. And it no one, you think about your life, you kind of got your routine, most people do. And if something alters that, you've upset the status quo and you're going to have to do something that's outside of your normal routine. And that's human nature. And I get it. I think we all do. But in this instance, because it's such an important thing to me, because you affects, so many human lives, uh, it needs to be upset. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be, and again, I'm both police. I'm for great policing. I want them to be right. I want them to be correct. You
Right. If we
can't do
want
them.
law and order, if we want it to
That
live in a society, in a civilized society, we're going to have some sort of,
boundaries.
police. Yeah, boundaries. And someone is going to have to be in charge, or we're going to have to give the authority to people to make those decisions.
Yeah.
But I think the other point that we're going to come up to in this documentary is who's policing the police. And when the
Yes.
answer is they're self-policing, it's not checks and balances. The whole idea of our government is to have checks and balances on every form of power. So we have
Yes.
checks and balances on the Congress. We have checks and balances on the executive branch, checks and balances on everything. But the way that law enforcement has evolved, that they are the check and balance on themselves. And that's not what checks and balances are.
No, it's not. I was going to say, you mentioned law and order. That is actually one of the subsections within the documentary. They talk about law and then order, and they're two separate things.
You look at any other aspect in society, if I was to tell you that the pharmaceutical company governs themselves, they're the ones that make the decisions about what should be done. We've seen problems with Boeing, right? One of the issues with Boeing is that they were self-policing. The people who are in charge of regulations were hired by Boeing. Boeing's your boss. What are you going to do? Are you going to
Right.
do what the law says, or are you going to do what your boss says? It's not about defunding the police. It's not about getting rid of all police. It's about reform. But his analogy of the ants is really kind of disgusting for me. I did not appreciate that one at all.
Right. Right.
I think comparing our society to an ant colony, although there is some truth in that, ants do defend their own colony, I think making that comparison is really lowbrow and doesn't really function to help us understand.
No, but to someone that's not really thinking about the overall, that could be sold. I get it, but I'm with you. It's really kind of lowbrow, and it doesn't dive deeper into what is really going on. They're just defending to stop someone from getting into their nest. That
They're not
they're,
patrolling,
they're,
right? The ants aren't
they're-
out on patrol.
no, they're not.
They're not looking. They're not stopping and frisking,
No,
which
it's
we'll get to in a minute.
there was a huge flux of immigrants in the 19th century. We know that. A lot of people came in, to New York, Philadelphia from Europe. We know that. And they were seen basically as an invader.
There's
They weren't
others,
seen
right?
as other, exactly. They somehow, this class division began like big time. But
I think it was
thing,
talk about the Irish, right? When the
yeah,
Irish immigrants,
absolutely.
you're not really Europeans like we are, right?
Right. You're
Yeah,
less. You're
you're
less
less
than we are.
than.
Now you've got all these people coming in from Europe and Asia and whatever, coming into the country, trying to make a better life. America, you're free, and so they're seeking. This is the bright light shining in the world. If your situation's horrible, you're welcome here. Come on, let's go.
In theory, you're welcome.
In theory, you're welcome.
It doesn't happen in Edina.
Interesting take. I'm glad there are people like this that are working on the problems, that are wide-eyed about it. I think it's important to see this. I'm glad that they showed us this.
Yeah, in the beginning, that cop in Minneapolis, he's showing this video overlay. There's actually a series that's on Max, HBO Max. It's called Real Time Crime. And this is a real thing. It's going on around the country. I'm sure it's probably in other countries as well around the world. But a lot of these departments, now, many of them do their own thing, but a lot of them have a third party that helps them. They hire a third party, and they have access to thousands of cameras across their region. It's a really interesting aspect, talking about Big Brother watching and so forth. But the reality is that a lot of crimes are caught on video. They're not necessarily set up there to catch someone. It's just that the camera is there. They have access to it to be able to watch and see something going down, and they've got it on video. There's that aspect, the Big Brother watching all the time. But then you come along and say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. There is that true. That is true. But somebody watching all the time, it's a little creepy, I guess. At the same time, if I'm thinking to myself, well, if my family was attacked by whatever, or your family was attacked, would you want that to be recorded so the person
You'd
that
want
did
it.
it? Well, you damn right you'd want it. Right.
Well, another thing that they just kind of briefly touched on was drugs. And I think I've heard you say it before, the war on drugs has been a complete and total failure.
Oh, my God.
I just stop. Just
Right.
stop it. Take the resources and put that towards helping people get off drugs. You're not going to stop the flow of drugs, but you can help
Damn
the
it.
people who need it. The war on drugs is a waste of money. It has been a waste of tax dollars since the 80s. It does nothing to stop the flow of drugs. It has
Actually,
only been a conduit to put people in prison.
this really started with Nixon. There was a pretty significant influx of money into this alleged war on crime and drugs and all that then it really got coined in the 80s big time.
All the money that has been spent on stopping drug dealers and arresting drugs and intercepting drugs, if we had taken all that money and put it towards rehabilitations for people who are on drugs, we'd be in a better boat today. We'd be in a better situation today, and less people would be dead.
And while they're on drugs, a lot of people are doing it to escape some painful event in their life.
Like we talked about last week, Brittany Smith had lost a child and had turned to drugs to cope. And if we had taken resources instead of arresting Brittany Smith for possessing drugs, and we said, we're going to put you in jail, instead of that, we say, we're going to put you in rehab, and those resources go towards rehab, we're in a better situation.
Right.
Locking someone up is not solving their drug addiction. Well, I wanted to take a look at stop and frisk next, because I think that that's such an important policy that we should definitely talk about that.
Ray Kelly said stop and frisk is designed to, quote, instill fear that they should not go out with weapons. It's not a response to crime. It's a form of domination and control.
I think I was getting stopped. And
this is the kind of thing that allows officers to escape accountability time and time again, and don't even talk about qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity created by the Supreme Court shields police officers from civil liability, even when they break the law.
Yes.
I mean, we're getting to qualified immunity. I kind of want to back up and talk about those other aspects. He said the police union wants 24 to 48 hours before an officer can even be questioned about what happened.
Yep.
Does anybody else get that?
No.
We want our records to be expunged, basically. We don't want that to be viewed by the public. If I do something wrong, I don't want anyone to know about it.
That's right. You're looking for the truth, but you want to hide the truth.
Right.
And qualified immunity is not a on-the-books law. Something that the Supreme Court moved to do. I can't remember what year it began. It's been on the books for a long time, though. Even when they break the law, you can't sue them. Sorry. It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Police Officer.
Because I'm immune from any prosecution or any civil liability ever because I wear this badge and I have the power, and you don't.
And you don't.
Now, again, this is not about protecting you and yours, and I understand that cops protect us and keep us safe, but there's got to be a limitation. It can't just be, well, they keep us safe so they can have free reign over everything. We can't question them.
I was always a proponent of more black cops. Get us a black chief, we'll have less problems. I don't think that's the case. I've lost a lot for just standing up for black cops on this department. What if I was just one of those guys that just kept my mouth shut and did my job every day? Where would I be, right?
We exist to assert authority when you can no longer govern yourself.
Fascist regimes do, they enable the police. And what does that
Yes.
do? Drives away our democracy. It's no longer about the people, self-governing people. It's like they said, it's the fourth estate of the government, fourth branch of government.
That's right. And we're, from my view, we're at least 1 foot in that door right now.
And you know what? It takes incremental change. It's not going to change overnight.
No. The one thing that a sworn police officer can do that no one else in this country can do, they can pull out their gun and shoot you in the chest and get away with it.
Right.
No
No
one else can.
politician,
No.
the president can't do it.
No.
The mayor can't do it, but a cop on the street can shoot you and get away with it. Yeah. They have that much power.
If it's for cause, because somebody's, hurting other people and they're going to continue to do so and they can't be stopped any other way, okay, they got to do what they got to do. I want good policing. I'm not against having police. I don't think anyone
Absolutely.
is.
Yeah, I don't think most people are. I think that people that say they're against the police is because they're so frustrated with the current
Yeah.
situation
Sure.
that they just want to throw it all out. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just start over from scratch kind of idea. And, I think people's emotions take hold and then they say, well, let's just take the money away from them. If it's all about money, we'll just defund them. Well, that's not the answer either. And I don't think anybody who's really studied
No.
this or taken it seriously wants to take all the money away. Instead of defund, what we need is demilitarization of the police
right.
force.
That's right. Exactly right. It can't be a militaristic organization. It can't. It's fine to have discipline to a large degree, fear if they do something intentional that they're going to be seriously punished. That has to be instilled. But we went the other direction. It's okay. Supreme Court said you have qualified immunity. You can't be held accountable, even if you break the law. It's okay.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy.
The idea of immunity is it's just too much. Well, a lot has been said in this documentary. A lot, I think this is going to be quite the interesting live. I hope we have some folks join us because there's just so much to talk about. And obviously we didn't get to it all. We never get to it all. I highly recommend you guys watching this one, especially if you are interested in law enforcement and how we are and how it got to where it is. It didn't happen overnight. The problem won't fix itself overnight. It's an incremental approach that needs to be done to, but one of the things I can say is end the stupid drug war. You lost.
Failed.
It was never going to win. You were never going to win.
No.
What we can do is we can get people in counseling and we can get people in drug rehab. That's a game that we can win. That's a war we can win. At least we can help some people. Locking people up doesn't help their drug addiction.
No, it just gives money to whoever runs that prison.
Absolutely. Again, back to money and power. It should almost be called power and money,
That's right. Yeah, we didn't get into too much into how much police action influences the criminal justice system and how much they can influence it. That's a whole other branch that we've talked about it in other cases, but it's directly related. It's directly at their feet and how this goes for a defendant, right? Whole nother subject.
Absolutely. Well, you said to me in DM earlier that this was a powerful documentary, and I couldn't agree more. I feel it's really powerful, really well constructed documentary that sticks to the story, addresses multiple different facets of policing, gave us a great history, and put it into context for us.
Gives us some great insight, things that I never really considered before. The first time I watched it, I was like, oh, shit, right, okay. And I'm sure that they, even the documentarian, there's so much they couldn't get into an hour and a half documentary.
Absolutely.
It probably is important. But I think that anyone, as you said, that's interested in how we got where we are, at least some of the factoids, it's a really good watch. Looking forward to the live as well.
Absolutely. Well, that pretty much wraps this one up for today. This has been Documentary Club, a place for documentary lovers. I'm Jeff.
I'm Jack.
And we'll see you on the next one.